You know, that kind of silence that feels heavier than any insult? That's what filled the room when my 14-year-old nephew looked up from the brand new $1,200 laptop I'd just handed him and said, almost proudly, "Dad says no one in this family really loves you. They just keep you around because you pay for everything." Then he grinned, like he was reciting a family joke. Everyone laughed. My brother, his wife, even my parents. And me? I just smiled, stood up, and said, "Good to know." That was it. No raised voice, no dramatic exit. Just calm acknowledgement. But inside, something in me broke, or maybe snapped into perfect clarity. My name's Harry. I'm 36, and for the past 10 years, I've been the responsible one in the family. The one who made it out, who got the degree, who landed a steady job, and who never said no when someone needed a little help. My brother, Mike, is 5 years older, the charming one who never grew up. He married young, had 2 kids, and somehow convinced everyone that every bad turn in his life was bad luck. Meanwhile, I built a small IT company from scratch. I didn't come from money, but I worked like I had something to prove, because, in a way, I did. My parents never said it out loud, but Mike was always the favorite. He could crash a car, lose a job, forget birthdays, and still be treated like the golden child. Me? I was the lucky one. The one they called when the bills piled up or a loan was due. It started small, a couple hundred here, a few thousand there. Then Mike wanted to start his own business. I even helped him register it, paid for the domain, set up the website, and connected him with one of my clients who was willing to invest. I didn't even take a cut. That's how twisted it was. I thought that by helping him, I could finally earn a little respect. My parents praised me when I wrote the first check, then turned distant the moment Mike's company started showing signs of life. "He just needs a chance," my mom would say. "You've always been so blessed, Harry. Let him shine for once." The problem was, Mike didn't shine, he borrowed. From everyone. From me most of all. And when he didn't pay it back, he'd joke about it. At family dinners, he'd slap my shoulder and say, "Come on, Harry can't afford it." Everyone would laugh, like it was some harmless sibling banter. But behind those laughs was entitlement. They didn't see me as part of the family anymore. They saw me as the wallet attached to it. Christmas Eve was always at my parents' house. It was the one tradition we somehow kept. This year, I went over early, gifts stacked in my car. I'd spent days picking thoughtful presents. Not flashy, just personal. For my parents, a framed photo collage from their wedding anniversary. For Mike's kids, new tablets and laptops for school. I even bought my brother and his wife a set of matching smartwatches because she'd hinted about them last time we spoke. I remember thinking, maybe this year will feel normal. Maybe we can just be a family. Dinner was fine, until it wasn't. Mike showed up late, as usual, bragging about how busy his business meetings had been. He winked at me like we were partners in some inside joke. "Harry, here's my unofficial CFO," he told his kids. "He keeps the lights on." Everyone laughed. I tried to laugh too, but my jaw tightened. Then came the gift exchange. My nephew tore through wrapping paper like a hurricane. When he saw the laptop, his eyes went wide. "Whoa, thanks, Uncle Harry." For a split second, I felt good. Then he turned to Mike, who was smirking, and said it. "Dad says no one in this family really loves you. They just keep you around because you pay for everything." The sound of it didn't even register right away. I just froze. My parents burst out laughing, and even my mom said, "Oh, he's just joking." But I saw Mike's face, that smug half-smile. He wasn't embarrassed. He was proud. He'd said it, probably more than once. My throat went dry. I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me. No one did. Not even a nervous chuckle. Not even a "that's not nice." I don't know what came over me. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair back, and said, "Good to know." Then I left my plate, my coat, everything. Just walked out. I could still hear the laughter fading as I stepped into the cold night air. Driving home, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a kind of hollow quiet. Years of generosity, countless family bailouts, birthdays paid for, vacations sponsored, and that's how they saw me. A walking wallet. I thought about every phone call that started with, "Hey, Harry, could you do me a favor?" and ended with a Venmo request. Every "you're such a lifesaver." Every "we couldn't do this without you." They never loved me for me. They loved the convenience of me. I got home around midnight, sat on the couch, and just stared at the dark. The laptop box image kept replaying in my head. His smirk, their laughter, the way my dad avoided eye contact. I realized that I'd been keeping them afloat, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being left out. Fear of being the villain if I said no. I wasn't their family. I was their ATM with emotional attachment. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before 8 a.m. Missed calls, group chat pings, even a couple of texts from Mike that said, "Bro, can we talk? And what did you do?" I ignored them. Then my mom called. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail, her voice trembling between panic and disbelief. "Harry, please call us back. Something happened with Mike's investor. They're pulling out. He said you might know why." I didn't respond. I just looked at the stack of envelopes on my kitchen counter, one of them thick, stamped, and already mailed. I dropped it off the night before, just before midnight. It wasn't rage that made me do it. It was clarity. That letter had my signature on it. And if they thought Christmas Eve was awkward, they hadn't seen anything yet. The next few days after Christmas felt eerily quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't reach out to anyone, and no one stopped by, which was unusual. Normally, my mom would have called to check in, and Mike would have shown up pretending to borrow tools, but really needing cash. This time, silence. I thought maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe that cruel comment at the dinner table finally made them realize how they'd treated me all these years. But then I got the group text. It was my mom, of course. "Family dinner this Saturday. Let's all sit down and talk like adults. No drama." I almost laughed out loud. No drama? My entire family thrived on it. My parents treated it like oxygen. Mike wielded it like a weapon, and his wife, Dana, could cry on command if it meant deflecting blame. But I knew better than to refuse. If I didn't show up, they'd twist the story, make it sound like I was the one who'd caused all the problems. So I went. Saturday came, and when I pulled up to my parents' house, Mike's car was already in the driveway. The one I'd helped him finance, by the way. My mom answered the door, her smile tight and nervous, like she was greeting a neighbor she'd gossiped about. "Harry, honey," she said, pulling me into a quick hug that felt more like a peace offering than affection. "We're so glad you came." The living room looked the same as always, cluttered, comfortable, and overly sentimental. Family photos everywhere. Mike holding his newborns, Mike's wedding, Mike cutting the ribbon at his grand opening. There was exactly one photo of me, a graduation picture from 14 years ago, half hidden behind a fake plant. Mike was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. When he saw me, he didn't even get up. "Hey, bro," he said casually, voice full of fake warmth. "Glad you could make it." Dana gave a tight smile, but avoided eye contact. My dad sat in his usual recliner, arms crossed, already looking annoyed. I sat down across from them, my jaw already tight. Mom brought in coffee and said, "Let's all calm down before anyone says something they regret." Mike snorted. "Yeah, that'd be a first." My patience thinned instantly. "You want to start there?" I asked, because I've got a lot of things I regret not saying sooner. "Okay," Mom said quickly, hands up like she was separating toddlers. "Let's not make this about the past. Let's just figure out what happened this week." "What happened," I repeated slowly, "is that Mike's investor pulled out. That's not my responsibility." Mike leaned forward, his fake charm melting away. "Don't play dumb, Harry. You knew him. You introduced us." Then out of nowhere, he says he's reconsidering because of some conflict of interest. "What did you tell him?" I stared at him for a long second. I didn't tell him anything that wasn't true. His jaw twitched. "You cost me a $200,000 deal." "No," I said quietly. "You cost yourself that. When you brag about running a business you barely manage and use my name to impress investors, that's on you." "Harry," my dad cut in sharply, "enough. You've always been so critical of your brother. He's trying his best." I almost laughed. His best? His best involves lying to investors, taking loans he never pays back, and teaching his kid to disrespect me at Christmas dinner. Mom gasped. "That was a misunderstanding. You know how kids are. Kids repeat what they hear," I said. "So what exactly is he hearing at home?" Dana finally spoke, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "Harry, you're taking it all too seriously. It was a joke. You've always been so sensitive." I leaned back and stared at her. "Yeah, maybe I am. Maybe being laughed at by your own family gets to you after a decade." The silence that followed was heavy. No one wanted to look at me. Mike just smirked and shook his head. "You're overreacting, man. You've always had this complex. You think we owe you something just because you've got money. I clenched my fists under the table. You don't owe me anything. I gave because I wanted to. But the second I stopped being convenient, suddenly I'm the villain? Villain, Dad scoffed. No one said that. But you could have talked to Mike before interfering in his business. So that's what this was, an ambush disguised as a family talk. I should have known. My parents weren't trying to fix anything. They wanted me to apologize for making Mike face consequences. I didn't interfere, I said slowly. I just told the truth. Maybe if everyone stopped pretending Mike's constant failures are someone else's fault, he might actually learn something. Wow, Mike said, standing up abruptly. You really think you're better than us, huh? No, I said, meeting his glare. I think I finally understand that I'm different from you, and that's not a bad thing. He laughed, that same arrogant laugh he always used when cornered. You wouldn't have half of what you do without me. Who do you think got you your first clients? Are you talking about the one you stole and ran into debt with? I shot back. His face turned red. You're such a hypocrite, man. Acting like you're some saint. You've been holding that over me for years just so you can feel important. Mom jumped in again, her voice cracking. Enough. You're brothers. This family has been through too much for you two to tear it apart over money. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt, just exhaustion. This isn't about money, Mom. It's about respect. You all laugh at me, talk behind my back, and then come running when you need something. And I keep saying yes, because I thought maybe one day you'd see me as more than your emergency fund. No one spoke. Even Dad avoided my eyes. I could see the discomfort flicker across his face. Not regret, just frustration that I wasn't playing my part anymore. Mike broke the silence first. If you're done with your little speech, I'd appreciate it if you called my investor and fixed this mess. I blinked. You're unbelievable. He shrugged. You started it, so fix it. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't recognize my brother anymore. The kid I used to build forts with was gone. This was someone else, someone who saw me as a tool. You know what, Mike? I said quietly. You're right. I did start something, and now I'm finishing it. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. Mom called after me. Harry, please. Don't walk out again. We can talk about this. I stopped in the doorway. I've been trying to talk for years. You just never wanted to listen. The air outside was crisp, almost painfully cold, but it felt cleaner than the suffocating tension inside that house. As I walked to my car, I heard Mike mutter something about me being dramatic. I almost smiled. He still didn't understand what was coming. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen. Old emails, contracts, tax filings, everything tied between my company and Mike's business. I'd kept every document, every transfer, every promise I'd backed with my name. He had no idea how much of his operation still technically depended on me. The investor hadn't just backed out randomly. He'd seen my name removed from the company's supporting partners list. A small detail, one that changed everything for Mike's credibility. I hadn't planned revenge when I walked out on Christmas Eve. I just wanted peace. But now, I realized peace sometimes comes after a storm. The calls kept coming. My dad left a voicemail demanding that I do the right thing. My mom begged, her voice shaking. Even Dana texted me a half-hearted apology, followed by, Mike is really stressed. Can't you just fix this for him? Every message was the same. No acknowledgement of what they'd done, no apology for the humiliation. Just desperation. Because for the first time in their lives, I wasn't cleaning up their mess. Days turned into a week. Then I got another message from my mom. We're having everyone over Sunday for lunch. Please come. Your father wants to talk. It's important. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. When I arrived, the tension hit me before I even stepped inside. My dad was pacing near the window. Mom looked pale. Mike sat at the table, tapping his fingers anxiously. There was a document on the table, a letter with a bold header I recognized instantly. You withdrew your guarantee, Dad said as soon as he saw me. I did, I replied calmly. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice trembled with anger. Without your backing, the bank is freezing their line of credit. Mike can't make payroll. Mike glared at me. You're going to fix this. Right now. I tilted my head. Am I? Mom's voice cracked. Harry, please. He has employees. Families. You can't just pull out like this. I took a deep breath, my pulse steady. You all made it clear that I'm not family. I'm just money. So I stopped being the money. The silence that followed was deafening. Mike stood, fists clenched, ready to shout, but then stopped. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. I didn't stay long. As I walked out again, I could hear them arguing behind me, my dad defending Mike, my mom sobbing, Mike swearing under his breath. The same cycle, just louder this time. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because people like them don't just let go. They scheme, they guilt, they manipulate. And I could already sense that the real fallout hadn't even started yet. And I was ready for it. If you've ever had that moment when you realize your family isn't really your family, not in the way you believed, then you'll understand what I felt the week after that lunch. The call stopped, but not because they'd given up. It was the kind of quiet that hides a storm behind it. The kind that makes your stomach twist, even when everything seems fine. I'd made my move, and now I was waiting for theirs. I tried to focus on work. My company, a small IT consultancy, had always been my anchor. I'd built it from the ground up, a piece of sanity in a family that thrived on chaos. For once, I felt proud of protecting it. Cutting off Mike had been the right thing to do. I knew that logically. But emotionally, it still hurt. I'd grown up thinking that no matter how different we were, family was supposed to have your back. I didn't realize until now that I'd been standing alone the entire time. That Tuesday morning, I was on a video call with one of my biggest clients when my phone buzzed repeatedly. 10 missed calls from my mom. Then one from my accountant, which made my stomach drop. I muted the call, picked up the phone, and said, "Hey, what's going on?" His tone was tense. "Harry, I just got an email from the bank regarding your personal account. Did you authorize a wire transfer yesterday?" My heart skipped. "What transfer?" $75,000, he said flatly. "To a business account under your brother's name." For a second, I couldn't even speak. My brain just froze. Then it hit me all at once. The only way that could have happened was through joint authorization. Years ago, I'd made the mistake of linking one of my secondary business accounts to help Mike make emergency payments while his company was still new. I thought it was temporary. I thought he'd never touch it again. I was wrong. I felt my pulse in my ears. "Can you freeze it?" I asked. "I already did," he said, voice low. "But the transfer cleared. You need to talk to the bank." When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the wall. The betrayal wasn't even shocking. That's the worst part. Deep down, I'd expected something like this eventually. But knowing it was my own brother who'd gone behind my back, after everything, still hit like a punch to the chest. I called the bank, confirmed the transaction, and asked for a fraud investigation. They said it would take days to verify. I didn't wait. I drove straight to Mike's office. It wasn't hard to find him. The guy had a big glass door with Henderson Logistics written across it, like he was running a corporation instead of a three-person hustle. When I walked in, the receptionist looked startled. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, your brother's in a meeting." "Not anymore," I said, pushing the door open. Mike was sitting behind his desk, phone in hand, mid-conversation. When he saw me, his face went pale. "I'll call you back," he muttered into the phone and hung up. "Harry, what are you doing here?" I shut the door behind me. "You want to tell me why $75,000 just disappeared from my account into yours?" He tried to look confused. "What? No, that must be a mistake. Maybe the system." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending." He sighed, leaning back in his chair like this was just another minor inconvenience. "All right, fine. I moved it. But it's temporary. You know how cash flow gets tight after holidays. I was going to put it back next month." "Temporary." My voice cracked with disbelief. "You stole $75,000, Mike." "I didn't steal it," he said defensively. "I borrowed it. You've helped me before." "Not without asking." He scoffed. "I figured you wouldn't mind. You've always said you wanted me to succeed." That's when I realized he genuinely didn't think he'd done anything wrong. He believed that my money was still partly his, that helping him had become some kind of unspoken lifetime contract. "You forged my authorization," I said quietly. "That's fraud, Mike. You could go to prison for that." He rolled his eyes. "Come on, don't be dramatic. You're not going to press charges. Your family." I stared at him, feeling my hands tremble. "You have no idea what family means, do you?" He stood up suddenly, frustration bubbling over. "You think you're so perfect, Harry. Always throwing money around like it makes you better than everyone. You owe this family, after everything Mom and Dad did for you." That line hit me harder than the theft. "What they did for me?" I repeated. "You mean letting me pay their mortgage? Covering your business loans?" bailing you out of debt twice. His eyes narrowed. You wouldn't even have a company if it wasn't for me. You used my contacts to get started. That was a lie, but I didn't even bother arguing. There was no point. You can't reason with someone who's rewritten reality to make themselves the victim. I'm reporting this, I said finally. To the bank, and to the police if I have to. His expression changed. Fear flickered, then anger replaced it. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He slammed his hand on the desk. You'll regret this, Harry. You think you're cutting us off? You're cutting yourself off. Mom and Dad are done with you. You want to burn bridges? Fine, but don't come crawling back when you're alone. That last word echoed, alone. It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. They'd always used isolation as a weapon, but this time, it didn't scare me. It freed me. I turned and walked out before I said something I'd regret. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my keys. On the drive home, anger gave way to something else, a deep, gnawing sadness. The kind that comes when you realize you've been fighting for something that never existed. That night, I got an email from my mom. The subject line said, "We need to talk about this." The body was a wall of text. She said Mike had made a mistake and that I shouldn't overreact. She said the family was worried about me and that I needed to let go of grudges. And at the end, she wrote, "Your brother's house is in your name, Harry. If you go through with this, you'll destroy his family too. Please don't do that to us." That line made my blood run cold. Because yes, years ago, I'd bought that house. Mike couldn't qualify for a mortgage, so I did it in my name, with the understanding that he'd pay me back gradually. He never did, of course, but I'd kept the title under my ownership, thinking it was safer that way. Now, they were trying to use that against me, as if I was the one in the wrong for protecting myself. By Thursday, things escalated further. My accountant called again. "Harry, you need to see this," he said. "Your brother's company filed a complaint. He's claiming you withdrew support unlawfully and caused him financial damage. He's threatening legal action." I almost laughed. He stole from me, and now he's threatening to sue me? He sighed. I know, it's absurd, but he's already spreading rumors to the investors, saying you sabotaged him out of jealousy. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, about turning everyone against me so I'd cave and make things right. He knew how much reputation mattered to me, especially in business. If he could make me look like the unstable one, the vindictive brother, he could still win. 2 nights later, I got another surprise. A knock on my door around 9 p.m. I opened it and froze. It was my dad. We hadn't seen each other since the first confrontation, and for a second, I almost thought he was there to make peace. But the look on his face told me otherwise. "Can I come in?" he asked stiffly. I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, arms crossed. "I just came from Mike's," he said. "He told me what's going on." "This has gone too far, Harry." "What's gone too far?" I asked. "You're ruining your brother's life," he snapped. "He made a mistake, but this is cruel. You froze his accounts, took away his credit line, and now you're threatening his home." I clenched my fists. "He stole from me, Dad. $75,000. You're really okay with that?" My father's expression hardened. "He's your brother. You've got more than enough. Why can't you just let it go?" I laughed bitterly. "Because it's wrong." "Wrong?" he repeated, scoffing. "What's wrong is watching your family struggle while you sit in that nice house pretending to be a victim." And there it was. The truth. He didn't come to fix anything. He came to guilt me, to put me back in my place. "Get out," I said quietly. "What? Get out?" His jaw clenched. "You're going to regret this, son. Blood is blood. You can't just walk away from it." I stepped closer, my voice calm but cold. "Watch me." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, realizing that this wasn't just about my brother anymore. My parents had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Later that night, I checked my email again. There was a new message waiting from my mortgage provider. Subject line: change of contact information request. When I opened it, my blood went ice cold. Someone had tried to transfer ownership of the property, my brother's house, using a falsified document with my digital signature attached. It was clumsy, obviously fake, but it was enough to tell me one thing. They were desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous. I closed my laptop slowly, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "All right, Mike. You want a war? You've got one. The days that followed felt like living in slow motion. That strange, muffled kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat louder than anything else. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my brother's smirk across that desk, my father's cold expression in my doorway, my mother's emails full of guilt and manipulation. It was like the whole family had been rehearsing for years, waiting for the moment I'd finally push back so they could all play their parts. The worst part wasn't even the theft or the forged documents. It was the realization that I had no one left who cared whether I was okay. For years, I'd been the problem solver, the one who paid, fixed, forgave. The one who dropped everything when mom called crying or Mike called panicking. Now that I'd stopped being useful, I was a villain in their story. I tried to focus on work, but the distraction didn't stick. Every few hours, there'd be another email, another call, another ping from someone who wanted to talk about what happened. Word had spread fast. A couple of my clients even asked me casually, "Hey, isn't your brother in logistics? We heard something went wrong with his investor deal." I had to smile through gritted teeth and say, "Yeah, just business stuff." But inside, I was burning. Then the smear campaign started. It began small, a few whispers in professional circles, subtle enough to sound like gossip. Then one of my longtime partners sent me a concerned message. "Harry, someone's been contacting our suppliers, saying your company's under investigation for financial misconduct. Any truth to that?" My hands went cold. I knew exactly who was behind it. I checked my company's contact email, and there it was. A fake complaint, signed anonymously, full of vague accusations that I'd misused funds and sabotaged a family business for personal gain. The language was sloppy, but the intent was crystal clear. Mike wanted to ruin my credibility before I could ruin his. By Friday, it felt like everything was unraveling. My accountant warned me that the bank had put a temporary hold on one of my business accounts pending review of the fraud report. My credit score dropped 40 points overnight. Investors I'd never had issues with suddenly wanted clarification before renewing contracts. I spent that night sitting in my dark kitchen, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. I'd worked for 12 years to build something that gave me stability, freedom, an identity beyond being the reliable one. And in less than a week, my own brother had managed to stain it. I remember whispering to myself, "He's not just trying to hurt you, he's trying to erase you." The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No postage, no address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Her tone was soft, even sweet at first. "Harry, I know things have gotten out of hand. We all said things we didn't mean. But family is family. You can't fight blood." Then it shifted. "You have to think about what's really important. Mike has 2 kids. You don't understand how hard this has been for him. He made mistakes, but you're destroying him. Is that what you want on your conscience?" And finally, the gut punch. "Your father says if you don't make this right, he wants nothing more to do with you. Please don't make him choose between his sons." I folded the letter carefully, set it on the counter, and just stared at it. The irony was almost laughable. They'd already made their choice. That day, I went completely silent. No calls, no texts, no responses. I stopped checking my email altogether. I turned off notifications, let the phone ring until the battery died. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to explain myself or fix anything. I just stopped. The silence was both torture and relief. Days blurred together. My house felt emptier than ever, not because anyone had left, but because I was finally starting to see how much space all that emotional noise used to take up. I ate little, slept even less. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking out loud, replaying conversations, arguing with ghosts that couldn't hear me. Then one afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, not the angry pounding I'd come to expect. When I opened it, my mom was standing there, bundled in her winter coat, her eyes red from crying. For a split second, I almost hugged her. Old instincts die hard. But then I remembered the letter and the way she'd chosen guilt over honesty. "Mom," I said carefully, "this isn't a good time." She shook her head. "Please, Harry, I just want to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "You look tired," she said softly. "I am." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, "You don't have to do this." Mike's scared. The kids are confused. Your father's angry. I finished for her. She nodded. He doesn't understand why you're being so cold. I laughed bitterly. Cold? Mom, Mike stole $75,000. He forged my signature. He's spreading lies about me. And you're calling me cold. Tears welled in her eyes. He's still your brother. I took a deep breath. And I'm still your son. That broke her composure. You don't understand how hard this is for me. You're both my boys. Then stop pretending one of us doesn't matter, I said quietly. She didn't answer, just wiped her eyes and whispered, I just want us to be a family again. You can't build a family on manipulation, I said. You can't fix this with guilt. She looked down at her hands, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she understood. But then she said something that shattered that fragile hope. Your father says he'll mortgage the house to help Mike if you don't. He said you left him no choice. And there it was again, the shift, the pressure, the emotional ransom. I stood up, trying to keep my voice steady. Tell Dad to do whatever he thinks is best. I'm done being the solution to everyone else's mistakes. She looked up at me, tears streaking her face. You don't mean that. I do. When she left, she didn't hug me, didn't even say goodbye, just walked to her car and sat there for a long time before driving off. I watched through the window until her taillights disappeared. That night, I sat in the dark again, same chair, same silence. Except this time, the sadness was giving way to something else. Not anger, exactly. Not revenge. Just resolve. For years, I'd been afraid of what would happen if I walked away, if I stopped trying to earn their love. But now that I'd seen how little that love was worth, the fear started to fade. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started making lists. Not emotional ones, practical ones. I listed every shared asset, every contract, every tie that connected me to Mike or my parents. I marked what I owned, what I co-signed, what could be legally separated. I called my lawyer and scheduled a consultation. I didn't tell him everything yet, just that I needed to untangle some family business. He didn't ask questions. Then I called the bank and had them lock every joint account, every card, every backup authorization. The manager on the phone hesitated when she saw the connections. Are you sure you want to do this? It'll cause some disruption. That's the idea, I said. That weekend, I took a long drive out to the coast. No calls, no laptop, no plan. I just needed to breathe. There's something about staring at the ocean that makes you feel small in the best possible way. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. I sat there on a weathered bench, watching the waves crash, thinking about how much time I'd wasted trying to prove myself to people who never saw me. I'd been their safety net for so long that they forgot I had limits. Maybe I forgot too. By the time I drove home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them head-on anymore. Not yet. They wanted chaos, attention, a reaction. I'd give them none of it. I'd move quietly, precisely. Let them dig their own holes while I built something new. When I walked into my house that night, I saw the letter from my mom still sitting on the counter. I picked it up one last time, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer. Not out of sentiment, out of proof. Then I poured myself a glass of water, looked at my reflection in the kitchen window, and said out loud, they wanted me to pay for everything. Fine, they can pay this time. And for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. But somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Families like mine don't just fade quietly, they explode. And something told me the explosion was coming soon. The weeks that followed were strange, not peaceful exactly, but clean. Like the air after a storm when the debris is still scattered, but the sky's finally visible again. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to a phone buzzing with urgent family problems. No more Harry, can you help us with the bills? Or Harry, the kids need. It was quiet. Uncomfortably quiet at first, but gradually, that silence began to feel like freedom. I spent those first few days cleaning everything. My inbox, my desk, even my head. I unsubscribed from junk emails, sorted through old receipts, deleted hundreds of voicemails. Most were from Mike or my parents, their voices shifting from pleading to angry to silent. Then one morning, I woke up and realized I didn't care to check them anymore. It was like I'd finally stopped bleeding. But something unexpected started happening after that. My work, the part of my life I'd neglected for years, began to thrive again. I threw myself into it like a man rebuilding from ashes. I spent late nights in my office, drinking black coffee and planning, not out of desperation this time, but clarity. See, Mike's smear campaign had unintentionally done me a favor. People were talking about me, about my business, and when the dust settled, the ones who stuck around were the ones who mattered. The loyal clients, the ones who'd seen how much I'd helped them, didn't believe a word of it. In fact, they doubled down. "You're the only one we trust," one of them said. "Let us know if you're taking on new contracts." Within a month, I'd signed 3 new deals. Bigger ones, clean ones, all under my own name, no middlemen, no shared credit lines. The kind of clients who valued results over rumors. The revenue started flowing faster than it ever had when my family was involved. It felt good, not because of the money, but because it was mine. Untouched, untainted. But the more I rose, the louder the echoes from the past became. One afternoon, my accountant called again, this time with a different tone, almost impressed. "Harry, I don't know what you've been doing differently, but your quarter's looking incredible. Your profits are up 28%. You're operating leaner than ever." I smiled. "That's what happens when you stop funding other people's bad decisions." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough. You planning on investing the surplus or sitting on it?" That question lingered with me long after we hung up. For years, my financial life had revolved around fixing, patching holes, catching others before they fell. I'd never really built anything that reflected me. Not truly. But now, I had the chance. I started small, new software, better systems, upgrading my office. Then, gradually, I began thinking bigger. I reached out to a friend from university, Rachel, who ran a logistics tech firm. We'd stayed in touch loosely over the years, always saying, we should collaborate someday. Now, someday had arrived. When we met for coffee, she looked at me with that knowing smirk only old friends have. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I replied. "You finally cut them off, didn't you?" I didn't even have to ask how she knew. My family's chaos was practically public record at this point. "Yeah," I said. "For good." She leaned forward. "Then it's time to do something for you. I've been looking for a partner who knows both IT and operations, someone who can help scale what we've built. You in?" It felt like the first real yes I'd said in years. We spent the next 2 weeks sketching out plans, merging resources, building a platform that would help small businesses automate supply chains. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was creating something better, something real, while my brother's company was crumbling. And crumble it did. I didn't go looking for updates about Mike, but they found me anyway. Someone from the old investor circle forwarded an article with a subject line that simply said, "Thought you'd want to see this. Local entrepreneur under investigation for fraudulent documents and misappropriation of funds." There was his photo, my brother, standing outside his office with that same arrogant look, except now it was twisted by panic. The story mentioned forged signatures, bank disputes, and investor withdrawals. I didn't even have to read between the lines. Karma had found him. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. Just hollow. Maybe that's what real closure feels like. Not satisfaction, just release. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew my family wasn't done trying to drag me back into their orbit. I could feel it coming. People like them don't stop until there's nothing left to take. That's why I started preparing. Quietly, carefully. I hired a legal consultant, a calm, sharp man named Davis, recommended by Rachel. He specialized in asset protection and family disputes. When I explained the situation, he didn't even blink. "Seen it 100 times," he said. "Families and money. It's like gasoline and matches. Let's make sure yours stops burning you." We went through everything: property deeds, business registrations, tax filings, trusts, even the mortgage on the house my brother lived in. Davis laid it all out with surgical precision. "You still own that property outright?" he asked. "Yeah." He never paid a dime of what he owed. "Good. That means you can decide what happens to it." A slow, deliberate thought started forming in my head. I didn't say it out loud yet, but it was there, patient, coiled, waiting. We restructured my business, separated every personal asset, and set up a holding company that shielded me from liability. Everything tied to my family name vanished from the paperwork. It was like surgically removing an infection. Meanwhile, the partnership with Rachel's company took off faster than either of us expected. Within 2 months, we'd landed a grant from a regional tech initiative, and investors who'd once avoided me now wanted meetings. The smear campaign had fizzled into background noise, replaced by headlines like, "New tech startup disrupts logistics industry with innovative platform." Every win felt like breathing fresh air after years of choking on smoke. And yet, I didn't celebrate much. Success didn't feel like fireworks anymore. It felt like silence that didn't hurt. Sometimes I'd catch myself driving past my parents' house late at night, not out of longing, but curiosity. The lights were usually on. I imagined them sitting in that same living room, whispering about me, wondering if I'd come crawling back. I never did. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten, just like before. But this time, it wasn't from my mom, it was from Mike. It started simple. I know you hate me. I almost threw it away, but something made me keep reading. He wrote about how everything had fallen apart, how the investors pulled out, the employees quit, the bank froze his assets. He claimed he'd made mistakes, but he never used the word sorry. Instead, he tried to appeal to sentiment. You're the only one who can fix this. You always have been. Don't let pride ruin our family. I folded it up and set it aside. It was the same song, just a different verse. That night, I drove by his house. My house, technically. The lawn was overgrown, the windows dark. There was a for sale sign crookedly hammered into the yard. I hadn't authorized that. My stomach turned as I realized he might have tried to sell the property again. Davis confirmed it the next morning. He's desperate, he said flatly. But don't worry, he can't sell what isn't his. That's when I made my decision. Not out of anger anymore, but out of principle. For once, I was going to teach him what accountability looked like. I spent the next few weeks in quiet preparation. I hired a private investigator to confirm a few details about Mike's activities, where the stolen money went, what he'd told the banks, whether he'd used my name anywhere else. The findings were worse than I expected. He'd taken loans using false collateral, including references to shared ownership of my business. I could have gone to the police right then, but something in me hesitated. I didn't want to destroy him impulsively. I wanted to end this properly, in a way that couldn't be undone. Meanwhile, my new company kept rising. Rachel and I expanded to 2 new offices. Investors were lining up, media coverage was steady, and for the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who valued me for my work, not my wallet. There were moments of quiet reflection in between, little flashes where I'd think, if only they could see this. But then I'd remember, they didn't deserve to see it. The turning point came one Thursday afternoon when I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was my mom. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was small, tired. "Harry," she said, "your brother's in trouble." I closed my eyes. "He's been in trouble for years, Mom." "This time it's serious," she whispered. "The police came to the house. They're investigating the documents. He said you're the only one who can help." The irony almost made me laugh. "I can't," I said softly. "And I won't." She started crying quietly. "You've changed." "No, Mom," I said. "I just stopped paying for everyone else's mistakes." And before she could say another word, I ended the call. That night, I looked out at the city skyline from my office window. It was late, the kind of late where the streets were quiet and the air hummed with distant traffic. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the guilt, the silence, the climb. And then I thought about what was coming next. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I had the truth, the proof, and the power. And I intended to use all three. After weeks of paperwork, consultations, and careful distancing, I finally had what I needed: documents, witnesses, and leverage. Davis, my lawyer, and the PI had done a clean job. Timestamps, bank trails, copies of forged authorizations, email threads where Mike or his people bragged about using Harry's name to push deals through, and proof that some of the investor money had been diverted into accounts tied to a shell company Mike controlled. Not a single piece of evidence was sloppy. Everything was ironclad. The difference between this and shouting in a living room was that this could be put under oath and in front of people who actually cared about proof. The other thing I'd gained was position. My partnership with Rachel had matured into a real product with paying customers, press, and 2 sympathetic investors who respected how I handled crisis and operations. One of those investors, a quiet woman named Layla, had been on my side from the beginning. She didn't like drama, but she did like clean books and solid people. When I showed her the files, she didn't smile or congratulate me. She said, "Good work. Now let them see it." That sentence mattered more than any revenge plan. It was tacit approval to proceed legally and publicly. I didn't set out to humiliate Mike. I wanted accountability. I wanted the truth on record, so any lie he whispered in a corner wouldn't stick. My strategy had three parts: legal, financial, and reputational. Executed in that order, in time to collapse like a clean house of cards. Legally, Davis filed the fraud claim with the bank and prepped the police packet. We had the forged authorization, the trail to the shell company, and sworn statements from the technician who'd logged the transfer request that night. Financially, Davis placed immediate liens on any accounts tied to the shell and registered a temporary notice on the house title, the very house they'd kept using as emotional blackmail. That notice didn't yank the house out from under the kids overnight, but it stopped any sale, any mortgage reapplication, any attempt to move assets. It also put Mike on a clock. Lenders hate uncertainty, and the least of his problems would be the bank breathing down his neck. Reputationally, I prepared a concise packet for investors and a calm, factual letter for my clients that laid out what had happened, what we'd done to protect contracts, and why they should trust my company moving forward. No melodrama, no emotional appeals, just facts, receipts, and a plan. Everything was filed with the same coolness I'd used to build my business. I invited Davis to an important family meeting. I told no one else. I sent a separate polite notice to Layla and Rachel saying I'd be presenting evidence that day to clear things up. I wasn't trying to get on TV. I was trying to make sure the right people, the bank, the investors, and a few honest clients, saw the proof before rumors could reshape it. Mike arrived with his usual swagger, but you could see the cracks. Panic had a way of making his smile thin. He expected a fight. He expected pleading. What he didn't expect was professionalism. We met in a small conference room at my office. I'd arranged the seating so the bank rep and an impartial compliance officer from one of the investors could be there. Davis had an extra set of copies of everything. I started by speaking very plainly. I've brought you here so we can end the guessing. I will read out the timeline, and then I'll hand the rest to the bank and the police. After that, I'll walk away and let them handle it. No one interrupted. I showed the forged authorization. I showed emails where Mike's assistant had asked how to make the transfer look routine. I showed where funds had been moved between accounts that funneled into the shell. The room smelled faintly of coffee and impatience. Mike sputtered. He tried the old lines. It was a misunderstanding. I thought you were okay with it. We were desperate. They sounded thin with witnesses in the room. The bank rep's face went from polite to concerned. The compliance officer from the investor took notes and asked precise questions. When Davis asked Mike if he had anything to add under oath, Mike's bravado melted. He admitted, in clipped fragments, that he had authorized certain transfers without my permission. He denied forging signatures, but couldn't explain the timestamps or the shell company nexus. The bank rep excused herself to make a phone call. I watched Mike deflate in real time. Then Davis did a move I hadn't expected but appreciated. He offered a way out that wasn't softness, an accountable exit. There is a path to mitigate consequences here, he said. Immediate restitution, full cooperation, and a structured repayment plan might protect you from harsher charges. But that requires transparency and immediate action. That's the moment truth does one of two things. It either begins a cleanup or it accelerates collapse. Mike blinked. He wanted it to be easy. He wanted me to be the soft cushion again. He looked at me like he always had, the one who would always take care of things. He didn't get the cushion this time. We submitted the packet to the bank that afternoon. The police opened an investigation that evening. The investor compliance officer put a temporary hold on any pending transfers and requested an emergency audit. Layla called me the next day and said, "We'll handle media if they come calling. You did the right thing." Her voice was flat but firm, the best kind of acknowledgement. The payoff wasn't dramatic fireworks. It was a sequence of small, irreversible things that added up. Mike's business accounts were frozen. The shell company was subpoenaed. The lien on the house stayed in place. Overnight, some of his friendly creditors turned stern. Suppliers began demanding payment up front. A couple of his employees, sick of the uncertainty, resigned and gave statements about irregular payrolls and unexplained invoices. The investor who'd once claimed loyalty to Mike called to say they regretted their involvement and that they would cooperate fully with the bank's investigation. Rumors of fraud kill trust. This time the rumors had evidence. What surprised me wasn't that Mike fell. It was how quickly the people who'd enabled him started to distance themselves. My parents called less and texted more. Their voice messages shifted from pleading to carefully curated concern. I didn't return most of them. Let them talk to the lawyer if they wanted answers. If they wanted to pick a side, that was their choice. There was one clean, satisfying moment that I'll remember. Mike sent an email marked urgent asking for a meeting. He'd found a potential bridge loan and begged me to withdraw the liens, promising full transparency. Davis forwarded the email to me with a short note. Do not respond. I printed the email, took a moment, then wrote 2 sentences at the top. We will proceed through legal channels. You will make restitution or accept the consequences. I left the email where it would be found and walked out to a lunchtime appointment with Rachel. On my way back, I got a call from the bank manager. Mr. Henderson, I wanted to let you know we've recovered a portion of the misappropriated funds. They were traced to an account in the shell company and are being returned pending the police investigation. Also, the bank has served notice to suppliers that erroneous transfers may have occurred, which will open their own audits. Her voice was official, not celebratory, but I felt something loosen inside me. I didn't dance. I didn't gloat. I walked into my office, closed the door, and sat at my desk for a long time. Part of me wanted to check every box, to see his life unravel, to make sure he felt the same panic and loneliness he'd given me. But I kept my hands folded. The satisfaction was quieter than I expected, calm, measured, the kind that comes when you play by the rules and win. Then, late that evening, a message came through from an unknown number. A photo attached, the house, my house, with the for sale sign now stamped with a big red notice from the local authority. The text above it was simple. I'm done. You win. It didn't say who sent it, but I knew. I felt a cold, small victory that wasn't about the money at all. There was one more thing I set in motion, a contingency I'd told no one about. While the bank and the police were doing their part, I quietly amended the deed on the property so that, upon any forced sale or lien execution, the proceeds would first satisfy victims of fraud and the outstanding company obligations, not family expenses. It was legal, clean, and vindicating in a way that left no room for emotional blackmail. If the house sold, willingly or otherwise, it would be because debts were paid, not because my brother's pride demanded it. I could have stopped there. I could have left him to pick up the pieces while I rebuilt the quieter life I'd been cultivating. But then I got a voicemail I hadn't expected. My dad, voice breaking, saying he'd never thought it would go this far. The pain in it was unmistakable. For a sliver of a second, I felt the old pull, the son, the peacemaker. Then I remembered the laptop at Christmas. I remembered the smirk. I remembered the letter with my forged signature. The choice was clear. I sent one last, simple communication, not to Mike, not to my parents, but to everyone who'd stood in the middle watching. A short, factual statement to the investor group and to my major clients. No accusations, just facts and steps we'd taken to secure contracts and protect employees. I closed with, my focus remains on delivering for our clients and ensuring no one else is harmed by poor leadership. I hit send. It was quiet, procedural, and final. The immediate panic faded. Mike called that night. He left a message I won't replay. He asked me to come to the house, to talk privately, to figure this out for the kids. He sounded smaller than I'd ever heard him. I drove out there because you go to the place where things started when you want to see how far they've fallen. The porch light was on. His car was gone. A neighbor I barely knew said he'd seen Mike leave in a cab hours before. There was a folding table on the lawn with a few papers and a half-drunk cup of coffee. My name was scribbled on one of the sheets, as if he'd tried to write what to say and failed. I stood on the walkway and for a second felt the old, easy responsibility tug at me, the urge to pick up the pieces. Then I thought of the smirk, the laugh at Christmas, the forged signature. I folded my arms and walked away. As I started my car, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was Layla. We've been contacted by a national outlet, she said quietly. They're interested in the story, but they want your side. Are you ready? I stared out at the dark. There was one final decision left. Go public and close the chapter, or keep this quieter, legal and contained, letting the system do its work and letting them survive the consequences privately. Both paths had their costs. Both would change things for good. I was tired, but there was clarity now. The momentum was on my side. I told Layla, not yet. Let the audit finish. Let the police do their job. When we speak, it will be facts. She agreed. When you're ready, we'll amplify it. I hung up, started the car, and drove home. The streetlights passed by in even intervals, like tick marks counting down to something. I didn't know if the last move would be public or private. I only knew I wasn't going back to being a wallet. I'd built something that stood on its own. And as I pulled into my driveway, my phone chimed again. A text from an unknown number with 2 words, "We need to meet." It was unsigned. My chest tightened in that familiar way. Anticipation, perhaps a little dread. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, and then I turned the car off. The air inside the cabin was still. I felt the final line approach, like a train about to arrive. I stood up and walked into the house, leaving the phone on the seat. The next move would be mine. But I didn't make it yet. Not tonight. Not until the timing was perfect. It happened faster than I expected. Once the audits were finished and the investigators wrapped up their findings, everything my brother had built, or pretended to build, came crashing down. The official report was damning. Falsified authorizations, fraudulent transfers, and misuse of investor funds. The local paper ran a small story about it, and suddenly everyone who used to sing his praises vanished like smoke. Mike was charged with financial misconduct and wire fraud. He took a plea deal to avoid a full trial, agreeing to restitution and community service. It was still public enough to ruin him. His business was dissolved. The bank reclaimed the assets. The house, my house, was seized and sold to pay off the debts. My parents didn't call when it happened. They couldn't face me. I think deep down, they finally understood what they'd allowed to grow. Mom sent a letter months later, short and shaky. "We didn't know. We're sorry. We miss you." I didn't reply, but I kept it. Not out of sentiment, but closure. Meanwhile, my own life went the other way. The partnership with Rachel took off. The logistics platform we'd built landed a government contract, and investors who once hesitated were now eager to work with us. My name wasn't just clean, it carried weight. I started speaking at conferences, giving talks about ethics in business, about boundaries, about how helping the wrong people can destroy you. People listened. I never mentioned my brother by name, but those who knew, knew. Months passed before I saw him again. I didn't plan it, it just happened. I was leaving a cafe downtown when I spotted him across the street. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, older. He was standing outside a pawn shop, phone in hand, arguing with someone. When he saw me, he froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. The city hummed around us, cars and footsteps and voices. Then he started walking over. "Harry," he said quietly when he reached me. His voice was hoarse, cracked around the edges. "Can we talk?" I looked at him. The last time we'd stood face to face, he was still proud, still arrogant. Now, there was nothing left of that. Just exhaustion. "You don't owe me an explanation," I said. "I know," he said, nodding. I ruined everything. You were right about all of it." For a second, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think this was the start of change. But then he said, "If you could just help me get back on my feet." That was enough. I stepped back and shook my head slowly. "You still don't get it." He looked confused, almost pleading. "I'm not asking for much. Just enough to start over. Please." I met his eyes. "You had everything. You had my trust, my support, a second chance 100 times over. You didn't just throw it away. You used it to hurt me. That's not something you rebuild. Not with money." He swallowed hard. "So that's it." I nodded. "That's it." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. He just looked down, shoved his hands in his pockets, and walked away. I stood there watching until he disappeared into the crowd. And that was the last time I ever saw him. That night, I drove out to the coast again, the same spot where I'd gone when everything had fallen apart. The waves were calmer this time, the air softer. I sat there until the sky went dark and the stars came out. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for anyone else. I didn't feel angry or bitter or proud, just free. Sometimes people say revenge is about getting even. They're wrong. Real revenge is getting back everything you lost, your peace, your dignity, your life, and watching the people who took it realize they can't touch you anymore. As I stood there, the tide brushing against the rocks, I thought back to that Christmas night when they all laughed as my nephew repeated my brother's words. "They just keep you around because you pay for everything." And I smiled, because now they finally knew what life looked like when I didn't.